start again, just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea
Drinking
to
warm water before bed
shining sea.
reverses tooth and gum.
From Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the
and a million faces formed together, made for elevation. And a soldier won't surrender faith. It's like a fire that never burns to embers. The voice of the unheard. Love is the answer.
I gotta speak it, believe it, that's how I feel inside.
I can't sit here quiet.
You can take my heart, you can take my breath, when you pry it from my cold dead chest.
This is how we rise up. Heavy as a hurricane, louder than a freight train. This is how we rise up. Heart is beating fast.
welcome everyone to another episode of Straight Talk with Joe Vollano. I am glad you are here. This is by far always the most difficult show to do. For the last 2 years, we've done this. We do the tribute to 9/11. Of course, they are never forgotten. It's always a tearjerker for me. I mean, I just have such vivid memories of 9/11. It gets me every time. But it's something we need to do because we can never forget. And I think the mayor said it best today. We went to the 9/11 memorial over at City Hall this morning, and the mayor said it best. I think we're living in a September 10th mentality. And I think that's important to recognize because if everyone remembers September 10th, we were in the same position. Everybody was in their own political corners. Everybody was you had the media and everything going on trying to divide everybody. And then September 11th happened. September 11th happened and all that went away. And September 11th, September 12th, we all came united as one for the betterment of America, for the betterment of each other. We weren't playing these divides. Our police departments were not being vilified. You watch the video. You watch this video of 9/11. It didn't matter what political party you belonged to. It didn't matter. We were all Americans. We need to get back to that. Our police officers, our firemen, our EMS, were running into those buildings, never knowing whether they were coming back or not. We held them up as heroes, as they should have been, and as they should be now. But today, the far left bashes our police department, vilifies them as abusers, as racist. That's not who our first responders are. You want to know what our first responders are? Go back and watch a video of September 11th. That is what the character of our first responders are. What it is now and what it will always be. Will there be bad apples? Yes, every profession has them. Even politicians. So we need to put all this back, and I think we need to do as the mayor asked today and just think of ourselves September 11th, September 12th, in that mentality and that togetherness, and we can move this country so much further along in such a better place, put us in a better place. Doesn't matter what race you are. Doesn't matter what religion you are. Those terrorists cared less about any of that. There weren't just Americans in those World Trade Centers, in the Pentagon. They were from all over the world. And we all came together against a common enemy. And we showed what we can do when we come together. America is unstoppable when we are united in a common purpose. I ask you to join that common purpose today and every day. Put everything aside. Put all your issues aside. Talk to each other with love, compassion, and understanding. You're never going to agree with everybody. And it's funny because me and one of my favorite liberals were just talking about, she happens to be my neighbor. It does not matter what your position on anything is. Now, my neighbor, and I was messing with her yesterday, is a hardcore liberal. She put a big giant sign of my opponent on her front lawn because that's who she is. And like I told her, I'd be upset if she didn't put that on her lawn. I know she likes me. I know she has respect for me, just like I have respect for her and her opinions. And we can agree to disagree. And we could come together as a neighborhood and love each other. So I don't get mad when I see that. I embrace it. I embrace our differences. But at the end of the day, we are united as neighbors. And that's what's so great about America. So I just ask everyone today, remember 9/11 and remind yourself of what it was like after 9/11, in the days after, in the months after. And let's go back to that. I'm going to do my best to do that. I tried to bring people together. That's what we do every single week here on this show. We try to bring everybody together, no matter what your ideology is. And we have these discussions. We have these discussions about all issues. Nothing's off the table here. Never has been. We've talked about abortion here. We've talked about healthcare, education here. We've talked about everything you could possibly think of. Because without having the conversation, how can we get anything accomplished? We can't. We are one city. We are one state. We are one country. We are one people. We are free as Americans. Free to blaze our own path. And to help those out and give them the opportunities to better their lives. That's how I see America. That's how I see my neighbors. That's how I see each and every one of you. I love each and every one of you. And together we can do amazing things, which is why I think this show has been so successful. Because we have shown that we can come together and deal with the issues going around us. And with that said, like I said, I ask you all to make sure you live like it's September 12th. And love each other, talk to each other, be considerate of each other. And we will move forward together, stronger. And with that said, we're going to get into some of these topics. Now, obviously, well, let's get down to the main part first here, I guess the formalities. For those of you who are new to the show, because there are some new members of the show, I met with a lot of people out in Cheshire. Yesterday, we were out at the Fall Festival. I met with a lot of Cheshire Republicans yesterday, which for the first time I've met them. They are absolutely terrific. I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm. I love that they're we all are on the same page and that we want to do things to better our state and our district. So I'm blown away by that. But they didn't know about the show, and I'm glad that they're here. So if you're from Cheshire, I know don't be shy. There's no reason to be shy on this show. Always feel free to jump in on the message board. But I am Joe Vollano. I'm your host and your guiding light through the craziness that is going on in our world today. And of course, this show always works best when you guys are involved. This show does not work unless we're all involved. So if you want to call in, 203-679-9610, or you can email us straighttalkjv@gmail.com. And of course, if you're on any of the social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, we're on all of them. And of course, we're also on the Vollano for Senate campaign, which is Vollano2022.com or Vollano2022 on our Facebook page. We are streaming live there also, which is why we have this great little disclaimer here that the SEC makes me put up here for every time. So just so we are legit and we are legal here. So you will see this playing throughout the show. So let's get down to, like I said, I met those out there in Cheshire yesterday. And one of the big topics that every time I spoke with someone, they were all talking about the schools and the bonding of the new schools. And I went over and I introduced myself over to, they had a booth, Vote Yes, because they have a referendum on their ballot for this year. So if you are from Cheshire or if you know people from Cheshire, make sure they know to vote yes on the referendum. They're looking to build new schools. And a couple years ago, I guess it got squashed because of bonding issues. And they were only going to get 30% of the bonds, and they were going to have to pay for 70% of the project. Now they're getting 50-50 split, which is a good deal. Hopefully when we are in the Senate, maybe we can help them out with a little bit more. Because listen, schools are expensive. We dealt with it here in Meriden. So we know all about what it costs and the process of building new schools. So if there's one thing I am very happy about in the city of Meriden is that we did build new schools. Now, the process of building the schools with the PLAs and all that kind of nonsense, that's a whole different subject. But the fact that I think we were all in agreement that we needed new schools, and the schools we got are beautiful, but like Maloney, they're doing a lot of upgrades. They needed to do a lot of upgrades even after they built it, just due to the fact that the PLA, and I always said it, if you remember back in 2014 when I was running for, or 2015 when I was running for city council, I said we paid for a Ferrari, we got a Pinto. And that's exactly what happened because of the PLA, and we won't rehash all that, especially for all you new people. But we've dealt with this. So if you live in Cheshire, make sure you're voting yes on November 8th at the question at hand of whether or not to build new schools. This is a great deal for Cheshire, and Cheshire should be embracing it. And hopefully they will. We're going to try to help that process by pushing it on our pages. So you'll be seeing more of that to come in the very near future. But I just wanted to throw it out there because it was one of the hot topics of Cheshire, so I wanted to make sure I addressed it. But again, it was a beautiful day out there in Cheshire. I met with a lot of the business owners that had booths there. In fact, I bought a couple of things because they had some really cool stuff there. So it was just an absolutely terrific time. I thank Cheshire, the Cheshire RTC, and just Cheshire citizens overall because we had a great response. If you don't know, I love talking to people, and I grab people as they're walking by just to introduce myself, and try to find out what's on their minds. And of course, the school thing was one of the big ones. So I thank them for their hospitality. Doug does a great job over there at the Cheshire RTC, and all their volunteers do an amazing job. So it was nice seeing all of you. I'll leave it at that. And we are going to talk about healthcare because somehow, Democrats are trying to put the blame on Connecticut health insurance increases on Republicans. And I was reading this article that there is plenty of blame to go around. And if you read the headline of the article, and this is in the Hearst, Connecticut media, and the headline says, plenty of blame on Connecticut health insurance increases. But there is one thing there is one place you cannot put blame, and that is on Republicans in this state. And it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs. 7 paragraphs it took before the author of this piece said this. But only one party has complete control of the legislative apparatus in Hartford. And does anyone know who that is? That are Democrats. It certainly ain't Republicans. Republicans haven't held both chambers in more than 30-something years. So I love when Democrats, and I'm going to say, and when I speak about Democrats, just a little FYI for some of you new guys here, I try not to refer to all Democrats because I think a lot of Democrats are not part of this woke cancel culture mentality that the far left has taken over. So I try not to use Democrats. I say far left liberals, but unfortunately for this issue, this is not the far left liberals doing it. It is literally elected Democrats that are trying to blame Republicans for issues with the healthcare insurance costs. The fight isn't with Republicans. The fight is within the Democratic Party itself, where you have your far left liberals who want to just absolutely ban all private insurance and go to a public option. Now, of course, the problem is with that. Does anyone know what the nickname of Connecticut is? Anyone know what our nickname is? In case you didn't know, Connecticut is known as the insurance capital of the world. Does anyone know why we are the insurance capital of the world? No, because Hartford, especially Hartford, we have almost every insurance company based here in Hartford. United Health, Travelers, Aetna, the list goes on and on. So what do you think? And this is why the governor is against a total public option and getting rid of private insurance companies. So I got to tell you, so if you get rid of the private option and do just a public health option, what do you think's going to happen to all those insurance companies? They're going to leave. And they've already threatened that. This is the main reason why there is infighting within the Democratic Party and between Democratic legislators. This isn't a Republican issue. I think if Republicans had our way, we'd make sure we reel in the insurance companies and make it affordable. And leave the Husky plan for those that need it. That would be the ideal way. Let competition, let you buy insurance across state lines. All these things need to be put in place because competition is good. You want to lower costs, you bring in more competition. That's the way it's always been. Going to just a public option and having strict regulations is the reason why you have what they want to do is a 25% increase in insurance rates here in the state of Connecticut. And that's because the legislators are mandating what they need to have. And that's not their job. That is not their job. That is not the job of a legislator. But Lamont is correct in this. We can't get rid of the private insurers because they will leave Hartford. Hartford's already bad enough in financial trouble. Imagine what would happen if Aetna left, if Travelers left, Connecticut Care left, United left. The place would be a ghost town. Hartford would go bankrupt. And we'd be having a whole different discussion here. Worse than when we bailed out Hartford to begin with. But There's one thing you cannot do. And there is one place you cannot put blame on rising costs at. And that's at Republicans' feet. You can't do it. In fact, really, in this state, you really can't put the blame of anything at the Republican feet. Because really, we have no say. Hopefully, that's going to change this November. Because I got to imagine that people have had enough of this nonsense. How can they not have? How can you not have had enough of the nonsense going on, not only in this state, but in this country? What we allow to take place, the way our culture has morphed into an entitlement society, which we're going to get into with education. It is absolute craziness. But again, we should be able to come together to fix this. The problem is liberals up in Hartford do not want to bring Republicans in on a discussion. Nor would they. Because they think corporations are evil. And we're not. We're not evil. In fact, if it wasn't for corporations, we'd be paying a lot more for a lot of things. But that's the mindset that they have. And that's the mindset they're trying to drill into people's heads. And it's false. It's just they just have a gross misunderstanding of what business is and what our role is. So hopefully November we'll be able to fix this. I'm sorry, I'm sitting there. I was trying to keep up with you guys' chat. Joe, can you answer a question? Why are teachers begging for supplies when the board had got a big chunk of change in the last budget? Listen, this is always an issue, and in fact, we're going to get into education here with Stefanowski and his parental bill of rights. I read through it. I have some issues with it. I have some things that we do agree on that we'll get into. But listen, teachers should never be begging for supplies. We spend we put a ton of money into education every single year. There is no reason why. I got an idea for the city of Meriden. I don't know how Cheshire is or Middletown or Middlefield is, but for Meriden, listen, instead of spending $1.8 million on a ball field that you don't even own, that the city owns, that you don't need when you have other fields throughout the city, use that money for supplies for your teachers. A teacher should never be begging for supplies. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on education. There's no reason for that. None. So, again, we could dive into that. It would take a lot more time. We would literally could spend a whole show on how our education money is spent here. I look at the pavilions, which are a joke. Again, not thinking about long term and who's going to have to fix and maintain those pavilions, which don't even make it. Like I said, don't even make any sense having there. But like I said, that's a whole different subject altogether. Eugene, welcome. I guess listen, most people watch this show afterwards, so I don't worry too much about how many people are on, just as long as the people that are on are engaged and paying attention and are interacting, because I think that is extremely important. So yeah, an AstroTurf, which again, but let's go through the Bill of Rights here that came through. This is something that Stefanowski has been pushing, but Stefanowski is playing it safe. Let's just be honest about it. Anyone who's actually watching and actually informed on what's going on with these races and the races, all races in general, I look at the governor's race because obviously that's one of the top ticket ones. So that could help you or hurt you depending on where it's at. So when I listen to Stefanowski, he talks in generalities. He doesn't like to get into specifics just due to the fact that he doesn't want to get caught up in it. Now, anyone who knows me knows that no matter what the position is, you're going to know where I stand on it. I don't do many generalities. I'm usually pretty straightforward and direct. So let's go through a couple of these. Banning transgender athletes from girls' sports. Yes. Yes. And now I'm not saying that they don't have a place to compete. They do. They absolutely have a place to compete. It is within their own gender. So if you are a biological male, you are going to compete with the biological males. If you are a female, you're going to sit there and compete with the females. That has nothing to do, and I love how liberals, and I say this liberals now, because Democrats and moderate Democrats do not believe this, in this woke stuff, in this transgenders playing with girls. Listen, it's just unfair. And for all those, and especially the feminists in this society who deem themselves to be feminists, they should be the ones that are most outraged at this. Title IX was just created for a reason, to give fair competition to each gender. You're basically taking Title IX and throwing it out and saying, listen, I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter what you want. Doesn't matter what we said in the past. It's not fair, and we've seen it. It's not even something they can say it's hypothetical, because we've lived it now, especially here in Connecticut. Because this whole issue started here in Connecticut. In fact, we did a whole show on it maybe like 3 or 4 months ago. We have to defend girls' sports at a high school level and a college level here in Connecticut and across the country. Girl athletes, women athletes deserve that. Female athletes deserve to have the protection and the right to fair competition in sports. And listen, again, this is not an attack on transgenders. It's not an attack on them. Some may see it that way if you're in that realm, I guess. But it has nothing to do with the fact that you're transgender. The fact that you could be transgender all you want. I don't care. That is not my place to tell you whether or not you can be whatever you want. But you cannot come out and tell me that I have to recognize that and bring that role on everybody else in society. No. You are given individual freedoms in this country. I strongly believe in that. And just as long as you're not hurting yourself or others, I don't care what you do. You decide that you want to go from a male to a female. God bless you. I will support you as long as you're doing it safely and with good mind. I will support you. But to tell me I have to sit there now and push those beliefs that you have on other people, I will not do. You cannot tell me that you are now a female. Biologically, you are not. And that's where we disagree. I will call you whatever you want. I will call you by your proper pronoun because that's a respect thing. I respect everybody. But I will not bow down to changing biology. I will not do that. Now, there probably is common ground here. And perhaps we can find it. But in order to find it, we all need to come together to the table. We all need to come to the table and discuss it and find a way to fix it, or at least to find common ground in it. But to sit there and say that I have to recognize you now as a biological male or female, I will not do. I will not do. And I will not tell female athletes that they now have to compete against you, which again, let's look at I even forget the name, but he was ranked 124th in Connecticut in swimming. Oh no, in track. 124th. And then when he went up against the girls, he's breaking records. It's not fair. That's what this comes down to. Everybody wants to be fair and sit there and focus on the emotions of the transgender athlete, but nobody wants to take in consideration the feelings and the emotions of the female athletes that have to compete against them. And that is what's amazing to me, especially with the feminists. The fact that feminists aren't up in arms about this is crazy to me. And in fact, they lost all respect of mine with that. And they've lost all credibility. You can't sit there and you're for female rights and then sit there and just let them go to the wayside because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Leadership sometimes involves hurting people's feelings. It's a fact of life. Some leadership is making the hard choices. But that's what leadership is. It's taking everything into consideration. Politicians need to start to understand that and start to express some of it. Okay, so next one for education for the Bill of Rights is choice in schools. Now again, I'm all for parental rights. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't even believe the Board of Education, the U.S. Board of Education, should even exist. Education should be done at a local level. The more local you get, the better of an education you get. And that is fact. That's why private schools that have interaction with their PTOs, with their PA, with their parental associations, that's why they get better results in private schools, even in charter schools. Because parents have a direct involvement in what goes on at the school. Now, a PTO in a public school is a little different because you're not only dealing with the school boards, you're dealing with the unions. Look at the teachers' unions. In fact, there's an article here. Right, let's see. So, latest results and we're going to go statewide here. Which, again, I read these numbers and it literally horrified me. So, test results due in late spring showed in 2019, 47.6, wrong one. So last spring, 49.1% students statewide met or exceeded proficiency standards in English, and only 40% in math. Compared to 2019, where it was 55% and 48.1%. So we're seeing how the pandemic really did have a strong effect on learning in the state of Connecticut. And how important it was. And again, statistics don't lie. That's why I love numbers. So me as going to school for economics, I live by numbers because numbers don't lie. And what is showing us over the years that having in school, especially, I'm going to sit there and say it in Meriden here because I have the numbers here for Meriden. In 2015, it was 40.1% for English, 25.6% for math. Coming out of 2019, the last year before COVID hit, they got that up to 47.6, 38.3 respectively. That is extremely promising. Now, to me, that's even low. And I'm not going to bash teachers or the public school system on these numbers because I don't know what they entail. But to me, if 47.6% of all Meriden's public school students, only 47.6 are proficient at their level, that's very troubling to me. Only 38.3 in math. To me, that just screams something's going on. But if we look at when COVID hit, it dropped to 42.2 and 30.5 respectively, which shows us that being in the school is much more effective than not being in school learning. Numbers don't lie. And this is statewide. It shows this, which is why Governor Lamont was for bringing people back into the classrooms. It's why people like, again, Secretary Cardona was saying we need to get back into classrooms. It was the teachers' unions that stopped us from doing it. Parents were telling us, this isn't working. We need to get the kids back into schools. And I'm sorry, Lamont was spending a lot of money to get our schools back home. The federal government was spending a lot of money to get our schools back home, and it was the teachers' unions. People like my opponent, who is the president of the teachers' union, who was saying no to parents. And it wasn't because they thought, come on, they didn't really think it was unsafe. You had nurses and doctors doing it through the whole thing. You had grocery store workers throughout the entire pandemic working. But somehow teachers all of a sudden, no. But it wasn't because it was unhealthy or scared. It's because they wanted more money. That's what it always came down to. Never let a crisis go to waste. And trust me, people like my opponent live by that. And the union gave them a list of demands of what they wanted. Some of them didn't even want to come back into the classroom. They were going to do it remotely. That was some of their requests. But they weren't listening to the parents. Instead, they were calling parents domestic terrorists for wanting their kids to get a better education. We were one of the first in the state to come back to the schools, to in-person learning. And our Board of Ed, again, I have my qualms with the Meriden Board of Ed, but they did an amazing job at getting things ready. We're going with they did 2 cohorts where they were rotating every other day. That was a great start. That's what every school should have been doing. Because that's what the parents wanted. That's what the parents were demanding. You need to get parents involved. When the parents feel they're being listened to, again, which is why you're seeing the public education system shrinking in numbers. That's why homeschooling is up this year dramatically. Charter schools, private schools. Because parents have more of a say. But there are a lot of parents who can't afford that or don't have the luxury of going to a charter school. And they feel they're not being listened to. Listen, special ed students, that's a totally different conversation. And again, kudos to Meriden. Listen, I have a special needs child. I have a special needs child that goes to the public school system, and they have a terrific program. In fact, I'll put Meriden's special education program up against anyone's in the state. They do an amazing job. Well, listen, there are schools for special education students. There's not only private, they're not only public schools. You can, and you should have that choice. So if I was living in Southington or Berlin or Middletown, if I had a special needs child, I'd want them to go to Meriden schools. Without a doubt, I'd want them to go to Meriden public schools. And they should have that right to do so. That's why I'm for choice of schools. That's why I'm for the money following the child. We have competition in everything. Health insurance, we have competition in. It is expensive. You're right. So don't you think you should be getting a bigger bang for your buck? I'd rather have it going to a school system where the parent feels comfortable sending their kids to. For far too long, we have been just throwing money at problems, hoping that it's going to fix it. Money does not fix problems, especially in government. But that's not the only problem happening in our school system. I think someone said it, teachers are leaving the profession. But why are they leaving the profession? You know, I was just having a discussion today with a teacher in one of the state schools. And when she's telling me about how rude and how obnoxious and how violent some of these kids are. And yet they're still allowed in the classrooms. I said before that our culture is taking a shift to an entitlement society. Where the kids could do no wrong. And all these school systems are having to play to a number. And I take Meriden because Meriden is, I know Meriden and I'm most familiar with it. We have what's called a climate specialist in the Meriden public school system. And I believe they're paid for by COVID funds now. But do you know why? Now, we had climate specialists before the pandemic. And most people don't realize why they were put there. Every time a student is sent to the office, that is reported to the state. So, if you have too many kids being sent to the office, your school is deemed, what? Not safe, in disarray. You name it, you can put any adjective to it. So, instead of playing to that, so instead of keep sending these kids down to the office, they're going to play the numbers game. They're going to say, okay, well, we're having an issue with this stat here. Too many kids are coming down to the office. So instead of not fixing the problem, which is the root causes, why the hell are these kids coming down to the office? Which is because they're rude, they're obnoxious, they're violent. Instead, when a student is being unruly, they call a climate specialist. And they come down and talk with the student and calm the student down. Instead of it getting to the office, they don't now, if it goes to the climate specialist, it doesn't get reported because they're not reaching the office. So the problem still exists. You're just masking it. And this is the problem when you have to play a numbers game. And this is with any occupation. Listen, I've worked for AT&T, Frontier. I've worked on many, many corporations where numbers are all that mattered. And I used to tell leadership, I could get you any number you want, but it's not going to solve the problems you have because you're not addressing the root cause. You want to solve real problems, get to the root cause of the issue, eliminate that issue, and things will rapidly increase for the better on its own. When you play to a number, you are now playing a numbers game, and you are no longer educating our children. Because you have disruptive students that are disturbing the educational process. But instead of actually removing those kids and putting them somewhere else in a different program where you can work on those issues, instead, you don't want to be considered a bad school. So therefore, you play to that number and you eliminate that number, and you can put your hands up and say, look at what a great job we did. Look at that number. We lowered it. Meriden did it when they lowered the curriculum, when they lowered the credits to graduate, because the number was looking bad. Because we were above the state mandate for how many credits you needed to graduate. So they saw that number, kids were graduating. Well, we can't have that. It's making us look bad. So let's lower that. Let's lower that. But again, Eugene, you're not solving the problem. You could diffuse the situation once, maybe twice. But if that same student is having the same behavioral problems, at some point, you have to turn around and remove that, because that student is now disrupting the educational process. That is a fact. Again, that is playing to a number. And when you play to the number, you lose the main focus, which is educating our children. And that's a lot of what I hear from teachers, is that these kids are so rude and disruptive. And they are right back in the classroom. Maybe they most certainly can be removed and moved to another program within the public school system. Absolutely they can. You just have to offer them a place to go. And that is something that they can work on. Why are you going to allow a few to disrupt the many? If you want more money for education, therefore, I would go with that route. Listen, the parents could agree or disagree. The parents could homeschool them if they want. Again, this is where coming to the table, and again, nobody wants to have this conversation. That's the reason why. Nobody actually wants to sit down and have this conversation because it's uncomfortable. Because they feel bad that they're somehow think that they're hurting the child. They're helping the child. And if the parents were more involved, maybe the student wouldn't be that way. Who knows? I don't know the situation between these kids and the parents. But there is a process. And unless everybody's coming to the table to actually talk about these issues, nobody wants to be. Listen, becoming a teacher is like becoming a cop. Why would you do it? You know, I love this little cartoon they have out there, where if you look at I think it goes 1970s, 1980s, it has the parents looking at the child as a teacher saying, there's an issue. And they're blaming the child. Now, if there's an issue, they're blaming the teacher. That is our society in a nutshell. The blame is going away from the child and how they're acting over to the teacher. Why would anybody want to be in that profession? At least in a public setting, in a public school setting. Same thing with police officers. Why do you think we have so many police officers retiring? Who would want to be put into that situation? It's just craziness. But unless we're willing to sit down at the table and discuss it based on facts, not on emotions, whenever you do public policy based on emotions, it drastically fails miserably. It has to be based on facts. And the facts are our culture, our society has gone away from having to have personal responsibility. Personal responsibility doesn't only fall on parents, it falls on children as well. I tell my son all the time, you can make a choice, but there are consequences to those choices. That's not only for adults, that's for children as well. We'll get more into this education thing as we go along. And Eugene, always feel free to call in. Obviously, with being a public school teacher, I love to hear your take on a lot of this stuff. So maybe next week we'll talk about it, and you can come on and give your side of it. Because I think at some point we're going to find more that we agree on than we disagree on. Now, are climate specialists a good idea? Listen, they can be, but if just as long as they're being used to take care of issues that are one-offs. When you're meeting with this same kid every single day, you gotta admit there's a bigger problem here, and it needs to be addressed. And that's all I'm saying. So it's almost 8 o'clock. I was going to get into Reds, but we'll get into that next week because it's not a big deal. I know everybody's so excited about football. Everyone's so excited about football. Obviously, today is opening day of football. Isabel, sweetheart, I know you're on here. I saw you comment on something. Isabel, how'd those Patriots do? So, my Dolphins. Addressing the problem comes at a cost. Yeah. Okay. I'm all for addressing the cost. If I tell you what, hell yes, Dolphins. Listen, I have no problem dealing with the cost if it's going to solve the problem. If it's going to solve the problem, I'm all for dealing with the cost. I'm not for throwing money at a problem you have no intention of correcting. That I have a problem with. Because now you're just wasting my money and you're wasting our time. So, but again, that's a discussion for next week. We're going to talk about this again. So, it's 8 o'clock, guys. You guys got a great game coming up. Well, not really a great game. And you got a great team with Tampa Bay, but then you got the Dallas Cowboys. So I don't know who really wants to watch Dallas Cowboys. They suck. But Tampa Bay, Dallas, I think is at 8:30. So we do need to change a lot, but that's, again, we have to have the conversation first, right? Again, at least I'm willing to have that conversation, which I think is where we need to be at. In fact, most politicians need to be at. We need to have the conversation and be willing to have the conversation and be willing to have the uncomfortable conversations. There's nothing wrong with uncomfortable conversation. Yes, Elaine, thank you very much. So as everyone knows, you probably don't know, you probably will know within the next week. We were endorsed by the Independent Party of Connecticut. So we are going to be on two lines. We have obviously the Republican line, and we will also be on the independent line. So come this November. So we thank the Independent Party for their for their endorsement and their support. We look forward to making them proud and getting their input on things in the future. But until then, guys, and I got to say this, listen, I thought we put this all behind us in 1776 with England, but since this queen was very pro-American, I will say, I am saddened to hear of her passing. I wish the best to King Charles III, I believe he is. But, I don't get much into what goes on over the pond. But, it is September 11th, and if anyone remembers, it was the Queen who ordered the national anthem to be played during the changing of the guards. And I think it was the only time somebody said it today. I think it was like 760 something year. I think Mr. Cardona, like 670 something years of tradition was broken one time. And that was, I think, a couple days after 9/11, where the Queen, during the changing of the guard, ordered the American national anthem played at Buckingham Palace. So with that kind of respect, I have to give respect back to the Queen. God bless her and her family. May she rest in peace. She did a great job, all that being said. And hopefully King Charles does a good job too. I know they don't have much power over there, but it is what it is. So again, 9/11, obviously, like I said, go forward and live like it's September 12th, 2001. If we do that, we will all be better off together. So until then, guys, I love you. Make sure you are spreading love, and make sure you're spreading and put everyone to the website. Until next time, until we meet again next week, I love each and every one of you. God bless you. And of course, as always, God bless our first responders. We love you. We will never forget the sacrifices you made, and the over 3,000 Americans made that sacrifice on September 11th, 2001. We will never forget it. Love you. Until next week, I will see you all later.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt